Supreme Court decision affects the HVAC industry and probably the most regulatory agency affecting the HVAC industry for the longest time, and that is the EPA. This story came out recently. I wanted to do a video on it, give you some reaction, but this is crazy. So the Supreme Court just had a decision where basically they're going to say that the EPA and other federal agencies have to have a direction from Congress before they can just make regulations and have checks and balances when it comes to different organizations and trades in general. So I think this is crazy because for the longest time, I kind of feel like that this has not been the case, that the EPA and a lot of other agencies have kind of went by what they thought made the most sense for the environment or whatever without actually having any say-so from Congress or any laws in some cases. And so let's dive into this. The article reads, HVACR trade groups are welcoming a recent U.S. Supreme Court decision that limits the power of federal agencies to set regulations without explicit direction from Congress. Industry advocates say a 6-3 ruling in West Virginia versus the EPA is an important check on agencies that overstep their authority and should strengthen the industry's challenge of an EPA rule that would ban the use of non-refillable refrigerant cylinders. In a 6-3 ruling issued June 30th, the court held that the EPA had exceeded its authority in requiring states to submit plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from plants that generate electricity. The reductions were to be achieved through cleaner burning of coal and the increased use of lower emissions fuels like natural gas and renewables like solar and wind power. Quote, "It is not plausible that Congress gave EPA authority to adopt on its own such a regulatory scheme," unquote, in the Clean Air Act, wrote Chief Justice John Roberts in the majority opinion. Quote, "A decision of such magnitude and consequence rests with Congress itself or an agency acting pursuant to a clear delegation from the representative body." So basically what they're saying is the EPA just can't act on its own, that it's got to have its own direction from the elected officials that we all elect. Is that a good thing? I would say so in general, especially if they were overstepping their authority. Quote, "This is really going to help a lot of industries that have been hurt by overregulation," unquote, said Alex Ayers, Government Affairs Director at the Heating and Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Distributors International. Quote, "The courts are not going to be differential to agencies as they have in the past unless there is a clear authority," unquote, from Congress, Ayers added. "It just really gets back to authority to redesign an entire industry. EPA doesn't have that," said Barton James, president of CEO of ACA, or Air Conditioning Contractors of America. In its majority opinion, the High Court cited the major questions doctrine, which holds that regulatory agencies need clear direction from Congress before taking major policy steps. The major questions doctrine will affect all regulatory agencies, Ayers said. Both James and Ayers said the ruling lends weight to their contention that the EPA is acting outside its authority in a plan to ban the use of non-refillable refrigerant cylinders by 2025 and require refillable cylinders to be tracked with QR codes, a rule issued last fall as part of guidelines for phasing down the use of HFC refrigerants. Hardy and ACA support the HFC phase down effort, but are among the petitioners in a lawsuit now in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia against the non-refillable cylinder ban. Ayers said that West Virginia versus EPA ruling could also be a factor in whether the DOE, or Department of Energy, proposal that would require new non-weatherized gas furnaces to have an annual fuel utilization efficiencies of at least 95% beginning in 2029 is ultimately adopted. While the DOE has the authority to set efficiency standards, Ayers said, phasing out non-condensing furnaces would force some consumers to replace gas furnaces with electric heating equipment, and mandating changes in fuel sources is outside the scope of the department's authority. At issue were the greenhouse gas emissions curbs that had been sought as part of the Obama administration's Clean Power Plan, which never took effect after being stayed by the High Court in 2016 and then replaced with a different plan during the Trump administration. EPA Administrator Michael Reagan called the Supreme Court's ruling disheartening, but said the agency will never waver from its mission of protecting affecting people's health. While I am deeply disappointed by the Supreme Court's decision, we are committed to using the full scope of the EPA's authorities to protect communities and reduce the pollution that is driving climate change, Reagan said in a prepared statement. We will move forward to provide certainty and transparency for the energy sector, which will support the industry's ongoing efforts to grow our clean energy economy. So ultimately, the Supreme Court has said that the EPA has been overstepping their authority, that they've got to get a little more direction from Congress. And I just think that it's interesting that the EPA for years has set standards and policed the industry. And I'm pretty sure that this is one of the first times that someone has pushed back and were successful. I don't know much more about this case other than what this article states. I'm assuming that the state of West Virginia is who it's talking about when it says West Virginia. And I think that's interesting as well, that it was a state itself, if it was the state, that pushed back against the EPA on these standards. I think that that says a lot as well. So like, this isn't just some Joe like me that is taking this all the way to the Supreme Court to fight this big government agency, that there are actual states that are saying, hey, look, you're pushing too far here. You need to get some direction from our elected officials before you go and set these standards. So how does this affect the HVAC industry long term? I think that you will probably see a little more of our Congress talking about some of these issues that the EPA in the past may not have even checked with Congress on. They would have just said, look, these are our new standards. We're going to enforce these rules. And now, because of this ruling, it's possible that we're going to see more elected officials more involved with some of these things. You know that Congress likes to have committees and all kinds of different boards and meetings and things like that when it comes to making laws and deciding what's best. You may also see more committees and things like that I would guess that people in the EPA will probably be a part of as well. So we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll get to see how the hot dogs are made behind the scenes now, and maybe even see some debate when it comes to some of these rules. I think we can all agree that helping the environment is a good thing, no matter what side of the aisle you're on politically. I just now think that, you know, you're going to see a little more transparency and maybe see some of these folks dive into this a little further before just things come out, right? Anyway, thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.